Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your favourite transatlantic football podcast. My name's Jack Collins, and I will be your host today. And joining me across the water, all the way from San Diego, it's Mr. Dean Jones.
Hello, mate. Yeah, I've got a bit of a skip in my step today. It's done. Survived another one. It's about
yeah, pep in your walk.
Yeah, exactly. About 20 years now, these transfer windows. And they're just getting out of hand. They're getting out of hand. They're just like, they've become such a monster. And every couple of years, you just see that it just transforms even more. Fabrizio Romano's to blame. But on the back of that, you've also got just so many, not even just journalists, obviously, just like random ITK accounts cropping up all over the place. And like every now and then one of them proves to be right. So then you're suddenly like, okay, that's a serious one. And yeah, it's crazy. Like that was honestly, I think the craziest transfer window I've ever covered. Genuinely. Yeah. I think it was.
I mean, it was a mental deadline day. So I decided yesterday on deadline day to start sort of doing sort of mini analysis on deals as they went through. I started this at like 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was like, probably won't be that many big transfers that are worth talking about, over on the Patreon. I did 68 transfers over the course of 24 hours.
When you text me and said, yeah, so I've done a bit of a dissertation on transfers today, and I saw a post and I was like, oh yeah, there is a lot in here. And I was like, part 1. And then I saw part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. I was like, Jack, what are you doing, man? You're like, are you all right? Like, this is insane content. And yeah, you need to be getting paid a fortune for this. Like, this is the sort of stuff you should be getting paid by The Athletic for. And they should be paying you like $4,500 for this. Not a $5 a month on Patreon. Get over to Patreon if you're not there, because it's very interesting. Like what you've done is genuinely like really interesting. Some of the deals I didn't even know about, because obviously you've gone into Europe as well as just the Premier League. Mate, how on earth did you have the time for that?
Well, I wasn't on the radio yesterday, so I actually had quite a lot of time, and I was trying to keep my mind off Fulham being idiots. So I basically was like, I know what I'll do. I'll try and write about the bits I know about and read about the players I don't. So it was one of those where, just watched some tape and had some time to sort of sit down and enjoy it. So I had a lovely deadline day. Also, it helps that Lucy's away.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I had
evening to myself. So that's what happens. She's away. So I can write 68 mini analysis, or 67, and one which was just Chancellor Mbemba has moved. Here's his song. It's fun.
Mate,
that was the rest of them are genuine.
I love it though, because some women go away and they're worried about what their men get up to back at home. Are they drinking? Are they gallivanting? Are they out? Like, what are they doing back there? And you're sat at home writing transfer profiles, 68 of them. That's insane.
Doesn't make me sound like the most interesting person in the world.
It makes you sound like a good trusted husband though, doesn't it? Eh?
I'm a good husband. A month in, I can say that now. I think we're onto those kind of things. Right, we're going to talk about those deadline day deals today, and I'm going to talk about who I think are the big winners out of deadline day. We're going to do that in part 2. In part 1, before we get to that, I just wanted to hand over to you, Dean, to our transfer guru, and ask what working deadline day was like, and also kind of your general thoughts on this transfer window as a whole.
Obviously, it's different for me from a lot of the transfer windows I've covered because I'm in America, so I'm on an 8-hour time deficit, which it brings its own difficulties anyway across the whole window. But there's just a lot of either working late or working very early to get around that. And so with deadline day, I was like, okay, this is the spot where I could really get tripped up. Like I can't go all through the night, because in fact, even the night before deadline day, I was writing a story that I'd got, and it was about 11 p.m. for me, something like that. And as I was writing, I was doing it on my phone, and I found that halfway through a sentence, I think it might have been a West Ham story or something, I was like falling asleep during the sentence. And it was like, and then I was like, and I'd look at what I'd just written. I was like, and that's literally not even related to what I'm writing. Like, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, I'm going delusional and I need to go to sleep. So anyway, woke myself up, wrote that story. And the next day I was like, okay, I have to decide like how I best get through this day to be, actually worth what I'm doing has to be proactive. And like, so it was a busy old day. Like on the morning of deadline day, I think I got up about 4. I think I slept from midnight till 4 a.m. and I got up at 4 a.m. on deadline day. And obviously then for here it's shut at 11 a.m. So I couldn't really have got up much later than that because I'd covered the early, very morning part of transfer deadline day before that part, then gone to sleep. And I felt like I was reasonably well covered, to be honest, because I did have a good handle on what was about to happen. But I tell you what, even after those 4 hours of sleep, I've missed a lot of stuff. Like, it wasn't like, none of it was like, the only one that really annoyed me was Kolo Muani, because I had a good idea that Spurs were going to sign Kolo Muani, but they were in this situation with Ademola Lookman. They'd looked at that situation. They'd been given some positivity around being able to sign him, but around about an hour before I was going to bed, like I was messaging another contact, and he was like, "I think they're going for a centre. I think they're going for a more like centre forward than Lookman. Like, I would check again." I was like, okay, so I check again. One person's like, "Look, the door's definitely open on Lookman, but they've got to buy him. There's got to be an obligation or a buy now involved in this." And they haven't committed to that. I was like, okay, so they haven't committed to that. Okay. And then I speak to someone else and they were like, they definitely want another centre forward. Like they're looking at 2 or 3 players right now. I was like, is Kolo Muani one of them? He was like, yes. I was like, okay. So at that point, Lois Openda's suddenly going to Juve instead of Kolo Muani. Tottenham have already tried to sign Kolo Muani in January. So I wrote this Tottenham piece and I just dropped Kolo Muani in the middle of it. And I was like, right, when I wake up, I'll have text messages that will confirm that Kolo Muani is coming. I can just do that straight away. But when I woke up, it was done. It was done. Kolo Muani was joining Tottenham. So it was fine because I hadn't got anything wrong. It was just like, oh, that would have been a nice one. Like, I had a pretty good handle on Tottenham. I made a couple of new contacts across the course of the transfer window, which is always nice. There tends to be a couple of things that crop up through people of people getting in touch with you and things like that. So Tottenham turned out to be a good one for me, apart from in that moment. But obviously, in terms of surprises, I didn't really feel like there was much that could have caught us out on deadline day. Alex Isak was always going to be the big deal. I know, you were thinking that Isak was going to stay.
I was skeptical. I really was. Not that he was going to stay at Newcastle, but that he was going to end up at Liverpool, whether that would be forced through or they'd hold their fire based on their stance last week.
It was, but yeah.
I think once the Voltemade deal went through last week, I think things started to open up a little bit.
It was always going to happen. There was no way Isak wasn't joining Liverpool. Liverpool just were playing a game, waiting on them. Newcastle knew it was happening. They did make one plea to him about a week out, but it was falling on deaf ears. Like, he was done. And so, Isak at 125 million to take Liverpool's spending to 415 million. It's unbelievable, really. I mean, we've talked in the past about people buying trophies, and this is different. I've seen a couple of people saying, oh, look at this. Like, Liverpool used to hate it when Chelsea did this. And I'm like, but this is a bit different because Liverpool have kind of raised their own money. Like, they've sold players.
So have Chelsea in this window for what it's worth.
I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about the Abramovich days.
I know, yeah, 100%.
And because Chelsea's money was, just coming from Abramovich. But Liverpool didn't do anything last summer. They've won the Premier League. They've sold players. and they've raised a lot of this money. I saw someone say it was like something like a £60 million net spend actually in the end. But I mean, this is aggressive. This is an aggressive attack on the market to make sure you retain a title, which Liverpool haven't done for many, many years, back to the 80s since Liverpool won back-to-back titles. And so we'll see where it lands. Obviously, then the big twist in the tale comes right at the end when we're led to believe that Guéhi is going to be done to Liverpool. I have to say, like, the main scepticism across the day had come from Liverpool. Like, Palace really, in the end, did want the money for Guéhi. Guéhi did want the move to Liverpool. And Liverpool were being led to believe it was happening. But they weren't counting their chickens. They just had this feeling all day that one might not happen. And for Guéhi, it's not the end of the world because he now plays every single week in the Premier League across the season for a decent team and goes to the World Cup. That's fine. And then, as it stands right now, he's leaving as a free agent and he'll have his pick of clubs. Now, obviously, Palace will try, I'm sure, to get him to sign a new contract. I don't think he'll do that. But for Liverpool,
they could sell him in January, which you'd still get 20 odd million for him.
Possibly in January. And I mean, that did happen with Van Dijk, I think, didn't it? Remember, like, there was the big chase for Van Dijk when he was at Southampton, and that one, I think, ended up happening in January, if I remember correctly. But yeah, for Liverpool, this is actually a slight problem because it is actually a flaw in their team. Like, Isak, in a way, just adds a nice new problem because the team is a bit unbalanced at Liverpool. And the attack, I don't know how this measures up. I don't know where they are all going to play. So it is something for Slot to get his head around. But there was no doubt about where Guéhi was going to fit into this team and what he would resolve for them. And so I do think that failing to sign him is a problem. That said, I do believe that Liverpool should close out the league as a formality. I do believe that this all means that already having an edge on Arsenal from beating them last week, from being them reigning champions, from having the squad that they've got and then adding these guys, does make them, like, I think it's a big, big problem if they don't win it. Like, I think that they've really messed up if they don't go and win the league from here. But obviously, it's Arsenal have had a great transfer window. Andrea Berta's been magnificent for him. Like, maybe he was the signing of the year. Like, he's been, some of the business that he's been able to pull off has been superb. Going, you know, whether you look at Arsenal's business for Zubimendi or Gyökeres or Eze, whatever, it's been a really strong window for Arsenal. Yet, you know, they're looking out the window, seeing what Liverpool are doing. You're thinking, well, theirs is just a bit better, isn't it? They were already better than us, and what they've done is better. So that's tough. That's tough. But all in all, mate, yeah, I thought it was, you know, a deadline day that was extremely exciting. You know, Arsenal did manage to get themselves another player in Hincapié. It was a great signing. I don't know how often he's going to play at the start. But it was a good deal, and there was other ones across that I'm sure you'll address as we get through this episode that I think were very intriguing and for some season defining.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's been loads of it. I think the spending is really intriguing, obviously. Liverpool spending £446.5 million, which breaks the record for the most spent in a window, but it's only fourth in terms of net spend because they brought in 228.1 million from sales. I would just go back to, it means it's about £218 million net spend, which Arsenal trumped 257 million net spend because they made 10 million in sales. And that's the difference at the moment in terms of making it. And look, a word on Chelsea, because they have gone and spent big again, nearly 300 million, but they've made a profit. And they had to in this transfer window. Them and Villa were under UEFA stipulation to make a profit from player sales over the course of this window, which is pretty stunning, I think, from a Chelsea perspective, to rack up 300 million in incomings and not really lose any major parts of the squad that you weren't that worried about is a bit of a win for the business model, I think, in terms of how it looks. Now, it's not to say that it's the best thing ever. It's not to say that I love it. I think that all of these things are fair to say, right, in terms of what it looks like. But actually, in terms of what they've actually put together here and how they've managed to move these players on, to hold their values, to sell them at such high prices. They deserve major credit for making that work. And although I think the kind of factory element of it isn't to everybody's taste, and certainly isn't to my taste, I don't think you can knock the way that they've actually spent this summer, because they've sold incredibly well to finance it.
Yeah, but they might not have a number 9 soon. It's the most important part of the pitch, and they're a João Pedro injury away from a 2-month disaster.
Mark Gue, mate. It's Mark Gue
couldn't get the Sunderland team. Like, it's that's what's bizarre about it all, is that
who the biggest losers of this entire transfer window are? Any Sunderland fans that bought Gue 9 on the back.
Surely they get a refund.
And he was there for 27 days.
Surely they get a refund. But yeah, I just like for Chelsea's like business plan and strategy, that Liam Delap injury just goes to show how fragile plans can be. Because obviously Jackson's pretty much refused to come back.
Could you not just say the same about Arsenal? They won Gyökeres injury away.
Yeah, but they've dealt with that before, and there hasn't been any evidence yet that actually having Gyökeres as the number 9 actually makes them any better. But yeah, of course, but Arsenal at least added something that they didn't have in the first place to try and be more multifunctioning. And
but so did Chelsea. They added João Pedro and Liam Delap.
Yeah, but then they got rid of players that would have been playing there, like Nicholas Jackson, and you could have put Nkunku through the middle, and like the business that has gone out. It just all. I've said it before on Patreon. Like, what Chelsea do doesn't necessarily make sense, because sometimes they're actually replacing players who were actually better than them. Like, I'd say that you look at some of the players who actually left Chelsea in this transfer window, player for player. Some of them are actually better than the ones that have come into the team. It's just that they haven't worked for Maresca as such. So that's what I find.
I mean, the only one I can think of kind of off the bat is I look at it and say, well, Christian Nkunku is a better player than Buonanotte, for example, which is fine. But you're not expecting loads of minutes in the same way. It was time for Christopher Nkunku to go, right? Like, he doesn't want to sit around on the bench and be a backup player or a second fiddle again for another season. He's wasting his career. But, apart from that, I look at Jackson. Is Liam Delap better than Nicholas Jackson? I would say probably not. But equally, they're going to make a major profit on that. So in terms of the upside and the uptick on being able to strengthen other areas of the squad, you'd say that's probably a trade-off worth happening. It's something that kind of I looked at with Newcastle. Like, obviously, you're not going to be able to replace Alexander Isak. Can you replace him in the aggregate and make a profit and strengthen the squad at the same time? I think so. I think across the board, Newcastle are in a better position than they were last year. They just don't have the magic man up top who can conjure something out of nothing. And Johan Visser is not going to be that player. Perhaps Nick Voltemada is, but he's the kind of potential, if you will. Whereas you flip that on the other side, and Visser is the kind of pedigree or the proven pedigree. So they've been able to gamble on, they've had, let's say, a 9 out of 10 striker in Isak and a 6 out of 10 striker in Wilson. I think that's probably being a bit kind. You now have got a 7 or an 8 out of 10 striker in Visser, and an unknown, but with the potential to be sky high in Voltemada. Across the board, considering Isak's injury issues, are they in a better place than they were last season? I don't know. But I think that sometimes you do kind of get rid of a superstar to improve the team across the board. And that's helped in the past. Look at Liverpool, right? Like, I think that there's an interesting development in that. And I think Chelsea have done that quite well, but in that it feels like the team has improved across the board.
But has it? Defensively, I don't think they are. Defensively, the centre-back and the goalkeeper are no better. Like, I would say that they're going to come times, like, they're the world champions, right? You see the banner, they're all talking, still singing about it, whatever. Fine, enjoy that banter. But you've got to now turn that into winning legitimate competition. And, this is bad luck that Liam Delap's got injured. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not totally digging him out. A lot of teams would be in the same situation of being caught short if they lost their number 9 this early. But I just think that, like, leaving yourself also short in goalkeeper and centre-back is going to prove to be a problem. When you've spent so much money across recent seasons, I don't know. I've just got some doubts about whether Chelsea can actually take the step up that I think they should be this season, which is to genuinely put up a challenge to Liverpool for the title.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I still have them third in my list of where everyone is. So we shall see. We shall see. Right, we'll take a break there. When we come back, we can talk about the winners of Deadline Day, which happened, obviously, on Monday. Stick with us here on Ranks FC. Welcome back to Ranks FC. We're into our main segment. We're going to be looking at Deadline Day in particular here, and actually a couple of clubs that we haven't had the opportunity to talk about all the way through the summer, mostly because a couple of them have had very quiet summers. A couple of them have been more lively than others. But I wanted to start, Dean, with Aston Villa, who I think have had an excellent Deadline Day. Now, this isn't all that commonly held an opinion. And I can understand the skepticism around some of it, especially when two of the three signings are Victor Lindelof on a free and obviously Jadon Sancho coming in on loan. But I think that they've done pretty good business considering their hands were tied. And the other transfer here, Harvey Elliott coming in with a very, very low, I think, for what he is, option to make this a permanent deal, I think is potentially one of the transfers of the summer. Now, I'm not best pleased that Harvey Elliott has taken the 9 shirt at Aston Villa, which I think is absolutely wild in so many different ways. But, that aside, I think that this transfer is almost perfect in terms of he obviously needed to get out at Liverpool and start to regularly play minutes. It's feel like that moment for his career has come. He's been a little bit stuck between a rock and a hard place, I think, at Liverpool, in that he wasn't quite sure if he fitted in that right wing role or if he was playing in the midfield 3. Now, Florian Wirtz has obviously come in and now they're playing with the 10. He must be looking at that and going, hang on, what about when I was here for the last 3 years? But there is a difference between Harvey Elliott and Florian Wirtz. And I think that the way that Villa play, and I know on paper sometimes it's a 4-2-3-1, but we often kind of look at those wide players as wide 10s. On the right-hand side of that, I think Harvey Elliott has the chance to go and explode here. And I'm really, really excited to see him under a manager like Unai Emery in a system that really, really should suit him, being able to come inside and dictate and make things happen in those central areas, to link up with Morgan Rogers, who has obviously played with at youth levels with England, and make this all work in this. And Villa have been, I wouldn't say abysmal, but pretty poor, I think, in their first couple of games. It's been a really disappointing start from Aston Villa's perspective. And I think that obviously with the inability to make transfers, it's been a really difficult one for them. Now, Evan Gerson came in, obviously Marco Bizot came in from Brest. It did look like they might need to buy another goalkeeper on deadline day if Emi Martinez decided he was going to be off. Thankfully for their sake, they've kept him be. And they brought in Yasin Özcan as well from Turkey for sort of £5 million, who's feels a bit like one for the future, as well as Sepekenyo Redmond, who's now gone out on loan, I believe, on the final days of the window. I think he's gone to Huddersfield. But I think that these 3 signings are smart work for Villa, considering they're working with one hand behind their back here. And that Jadon Sancho, on paper, this is a really nice fit. But on paper, there's been quite a lot of nice fits for Jadon Sancho, right? It's not necessarily about what's going on. And it feels a little bit like, I think, that all 3 parties were like, no, yeah, all right. As opposed to, yes, we want this 100%. And I think that that's probably fine. United probably wanted a fee. Villa didn't want to buy him outright. Villa has, had no money to spend in terms of where their headroom was on PSR. And Jadon Sancho felt like he'd knocked back loads of offers, and he must have looked at it on deadline day and gone, where's this or Turkey? So I suppose I'm going to go here. Now, we've seen there be resurgences in players' careers under Unai Emery before, not just at Aston Villa, but his time at Villarreal as well, where players who came in, who people thought were finished, and he's got a tune out of players that, nobody thought had anything left to give. There must be something for Sancho to work for here. And I think whether that's the fact that at the end of the season, his contract is up and he gets his pick of clubs who are going to give him those kind of monster offers and see what that looks like, or because he has one eye on the World Cup squad, or whatever that looks like, right? He has gone somewhere where his performances will get noticed if he's playing well. And that should be enough of a bonus. That should be enough of an incentive for Jadon Sancho to play here. Now, look, again, we've seen this before. He started pretty well at Chelsea last season and really, really tailed off, although obviously he got a goal in the Conference League final. It hasn't been plain sailing for him for some time now. But I think him, an experienced defender, Victor Lindelof, who I've always kind of thought was slightly underrated in terms of the consistency of his performances. Was he a world beater? No. Was he, perfectly serviceable in a number of different positions to be able to do a job, and with a real air of kind of leadership and someone who takes responsibility on? I've always kind of thought so. And I think that we might well see a little bit more from him in a new Emery team than we did at Manchester United, especially given that he felt like he was on the fringes for the last few years where he was there. I think in terms of deadline day business, as seasons go, as teams go, and knowing what we know about the way that Villa were able to operate, I think that Harvey Elliott, Jadon Sancho and Victor Lindelof is a very smart deadline day from Villa.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to get a tune out of Ollie Watkins again, ultimately. He needs to get firing. Ollie Watkins hasn't actually got a good goal record, not just for this season where Aston Villa haven't scored a goal all season in the Premier League, but go back to March, Ollie Watkins hasn't been scoring goals. And so it's time to get like the best version of Ollie Watkins again. How do you do that? It's going to be the people that are around him that are creating the chances. Obviously, like Ramsey going, Bailey going, like you're suddenly then taking out two players where he understands the rhythms and the movements and stuff like that. And it's not helped that they haven't had those sorts of players around for these 3 games. So now you're adding to it, and I think it's important that they obviously brought in players like this. And Sancho and Elliott. Is Elliott playing on the right? Is he playing through the middle? I don't know. I don't know what the plan is.
I think probably on the right. Outside of Morgan Rogers, I think is probably the best place for him to be. And so that there's that link up and they can drift. We know that Morgan Rogers drifts to the flanks anyway. I do think that there's the room for a really nice little bit of intertwining and dovetailing here between the two of them.
Yeah, and so like to just imagine what it might look like if you've got Sancho, Rogers and Elliott behind Ollie Watkins, pretty tasty. Like that if they're all in form. Will Sancho go straight into the team? I'm not sure. I think Harvey Elliott does. I'm not sure Jadon Sancho would be going straight into this team. And I don't think the conditioning of him will mean that he probably can. I'm just going through past experience of knowing what Jadon Sancho's been like at other clubs. But yeah, I do feel like a lot of this has to be about getting a tune out of Watkins again. Obviously, they got Guesson who's in there, and they'll be looking for him to make impact. They've, not having making the Champions League has clearly had a big impact on what they have been able to do, and there have been repercussions to that in terms of the sales that they've had to make. But their climb down from Aston Villa this season has been astonishing, and I think my bigger concern is not just in the actual personnel, but in the attitude and application of these players in the opening weeks of the season as to why the drop-off has been so drastic. Maybe it's reflected in the fact that somebody like Emi Martinez, who has been so central to everything at the club, is basically having his head turned. He's sat there on deadline day waiting for Man United to call, and the call hasn't come. So has he now got his tail between his legs? He's one of the leaders of the team. He's basically waved goodbye last week, and he ain't gone anywhere. He's still there. So unless he goes to Turkey or Saudi in the coming days, which I don't think is going to happen, then they've got to turn around that situation. Very strange. But yeah, for a day that began with, there was already talk about Lindelof coming in, and it's not bad signing. It's hardly the sort of news.
Perfectly
it's fine.
It's not going to set any heart on.
Yeah,
that's fine.
But then to end the day knowing, okay, we've got 2 attacking players in Harvey Elliott in particular, has so much motivation to do well. A few other clubs tried to sign Harvey Elliott. He was determined to stay at as high a level as he could so that he didn't have a big step down from Liverpool. He knew that any step down from Liverpool was going to happen. But, for example, he didn't want to go back to Fulham because it was too far from where he was right now and where he was trying to remain at. And Aston Villa obviously has potential of a trophy, a potential of a European finish, all those things. So I think he'll prove to be the best out of that bunch.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the best transfers that's happened all window, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I think that's a nice one for Aston Villa fans to get stuck into. I'm going to go from a team who's done almost nothing this window to a team who have been exceptionally busy, Sunderland, who have brought in 15 players over the course of this window. Now, not all of them are going into the first team. They brought in Matthew Burns from Coleraine, the Northern Irish youngster, and Isaac Allen, the young keeper from Lincoln City, for very low fees. But I do think that they've made some really interesting signings. And on deadline day, they went double Dutch twice. So they did a double swoop on Ajax for Brian Brobby and Bertrand Traore, which I think is intriguing. But they also brought in 2 Dutch internationals, Brobby and Luchrel Geertruida, which again, I think is right up there. Geertruida with one of the best deals of the window, with a loan there, with an option that I think is around sort of the £18 million mark. But I think that you look at it, Brobby's the risk, I think, at 21 million. But look at Christian Spickman and you're looking at it and saying, okay, you lost the number 9 that was coming in terms of that loan for Mark Yu. And instead, you have to turn around in the space of 2-3 days when this all gets pulled under the carpet and it goes back and you're like, wow, what do we do now? And they make this move for Brobby. Now, there are question marks about Brian Brobby, mostly about the fact that when he left Ajax the first time, he went to Leipzig, basically didn't get a look in, looked out of place in the Leipzig system, and ended up going back to Ajax on loan and then a permanent deal. But I think that has been potentially pushed a little bit too far. Because I think that, one, he was an incredibly young player when that transfer happened. And he's still a young man now, but he was very, very young when he went off to Leipzig the first time. And 2, he's kind of performed now under a lot of different managers at Ajax with a lot of different systems, many of whom have been pretty unsuccessful in the past couple of years. So you look at it and saying, Farioli obviously fell away from the title last year. But you look back at Alfred Schroeder, you look at Johnny Heitinger, who's in charge and has been there a couple of times as a caretaker as well, and Stein as well. So he's played under a number of managers and he's been relatively successful in a lot of those systems. Now, he's not the perfect player. I think that he is obviously a bit of an athletic freak in some ways. He's incredibly strong. He's quick, but not like rapid fast. And the way that he holds the ball up well, I think is going to be a big thing for this Sunderland team. And I think that's the thing that will make him work in the Premier League. He's good in the box. He's got good movement. He get finished from different angles. I've always quite liked Brobby. And I thought that he got a raw deal off the back of the Leipzig thing, and that, no one was going to take a punt as well. Again, Sunderland have. And it's a relatively big punt at 20 odd million. But I think that it's the kind of thing that, they needed to do, and they needed to make changes in this team. Bertrand Traore comes as well, but he is a much, much lower risk option. He's £2.5 million. They've got him on a 1-year contract. And there's an option, I think, for a second year if this goes well. He's the experience to this. And someone to give a bit of backup on the right wing with Chemstein Talby, who started the season really, really well, I think. But also the fact that Patrick Roberts goes off on loan to Birmingham City is probably the sense that, okay, they're making a move and they're moving things in different directions to try and shift them on and make things happen. So when you put it all into the perspective of that, there is this one last deal, which is Luchrel Geertruida. And I think this is one of the smartest moves I've seen across the course of the window. Now, he hasn't been all that happy at Leipzig. He was linked with a load of moves earlier in the summer, potential reunion with Arne Slot, who was excellent for at Feyenoord. He's ended up joining this Sunderland project. And he gives one competition, but I think he will move ahead of Tri Hume in the pecking order. That's a little bit of a shame for the youngster. But I do think that if Sunderland are kind of going absolutely all at it to survive, no one's going to be able to say after the window that they've had that they haven't given everything to try and make sure that they're competitive in the Premier League this season. Obviously, 2 wins out of 3 is not bad going. They'll be disappointed to have lost to Burnley and that it's a relegation 6-pointer if you can have one of those so early on in the season. But I think that they've shown that they've got enough to compete. And that's a really good place for them to be. Geertruida is one of those players that I just don't see many faults with. He's a really versatile operator. He's played at right back. He's played at centre back. He's played at defensive midfield. I think he will be playing at right back here. We saw Nordi Mukiele start his first game for Sunderland at centre half next to Omar Alderete, which I think is a decent pairing that has the potential to be pretty solid through the course of the season. But he could move in there if he was needed. But I think that on the right, his composure on the ball, his ability to just sort of settle and make sure that the passes are correct, to shield the ball really well when he's in possession and make sure he doesn't lose it in dangerous areas. He's just a really complete footballer. And I think that Sunderland have gone in here and made a deal for a player who at the start of the summer, it would have been almost impossible for them to get. And deadline day is a bit like that, right? You have to be able to move with it and see what opportunities open up. And that's why a lot of teams like to leave things late. And I know that, Fulham are guilty of this. I want to talk about Fulham very briefly in a moment. But I think that Sunderland have seen the opportunities in the market on deadline day and they've taken them. And it's not like they haven't been active through the rest of the transfer window either. They've had a really good window, a really strong window. They've spent a lot of money in terms of improving this squad. It used to be known as doing a Fulham, obviously in that kind of doomed season where Fulham spent £110 million or whatever it was to try and survive. I think in recent times, there's been a change of attitude in this. You know, Villa did it. They spent a lot of money. People said, you're doing a Fulham. They stayed up. Forest did it. They spent a lot of money. They bought a lot of players. They said, you're doing a Fulham. They stayed up. I think that it's been shown that if you do bring in the right kind of players, that things can take a turn for the better. And I think Sunderland have done really well in their profiling of players across the course of this summer.
Yeah, because they've bought players with European experience. They've bought players who are reasonably youthful. They've bought players who can be sold on if this doesn't work out. And so it's been pretty sensational. I can't imagine how Sunderland fans are feeling right now compared to the probably sense of fear in a way when they first got promoted. They've basically got an entirely different team now, apart from a few hardcore from last season. But they need to blend. They've still got that mentality from last season that got them over the line and got them to the Premier League. And we've seen that with their late goals recently. So they've still got that. But they've had to obviously improve the quality of the squad, but definitely the starting 11. And these signings that they've made late on just absolutely underline their intent to try and stay in this division. It reminds me in a lot of ways to what Nottingham Forest did when they came up and the aggressive nature that they attacked the market with and they continue to attack the market with. Maybe that's the only model these days that can work. Maybe that's what you need to do to stay up in that first season and then spend a sustained period in there, establishing yourselves and actually competing. It's really tough to stay in the Prem. And when Sunderland came up, I didn't give them a hope in hell. But they've...
Especially because they came up through the playoffs, right? Which is famously the hardest place to survive.
They came from... They weren't expected to get here. And they kept plugging away, and they got there. And as I say, you're still seeing that trait in their performances where they do not give up. And that's really admirable. But that's not going to last a whole season because you're going to get tired and you're going to get a few batterings along the way. So what do? You raise the quality of the squad. And by getting here Truder in, by getting Brian Brobby in, you're making up that gap that you didn't have in quality from last season. You're making sure. And maybe they really went for it because of the good start that they've made this season. Maybe they've surprised themselves at how the gap maybe isn't as big as they initially thought. Either way, it's very, very positive, this from Sunderland. Their fans will be as excited for this season now as they have been for any season. And at the very least, they know that their club have gone into the market and given themselves the best possible chance of actually staying there. They might not, and if they don't, then they'll have to sell some of these players off. But that's the good thing with this type of players that they've got as well. They're players that can be sold to get money back in to mean that they survive and they're not just going to drift away again.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's been a really intriguing summer. And yeah, Sunderland fans must be a little bit in dreamland with how things are going at the moment. And look, the flip side of that is Leeds, right? Who on deadline day, after all of this talk about improving the forward options and trying to make them stick and, bringing back Manor Solomon and all of that, it ends up with a last minute move for Harry Wilson, which ends up being quashed by Fulham. And Leeds fans, I saw on social media yesterday, basically being like, I give up. This season's a write-off. Leave it be. And they're like, wow, okay. Considering the start that you've had, where it's just been pretty solid, you're already kind of writing it off. That's a very difficult place, I think, for fans to be when they see Sunderland, who have come up in a less position of strength than Leeds were in. Leeds were far and away, by my money, the best team in the Championship last season. Seeing Sunderland go and spend that kind of cash, I think must be a bit of a kick in the teeth for Leeds fans. Quickly, just two more to chat about in the Premier League. One is Nottingham Forest, who have brought in another load of players.
Mate, this is unbelievable. Every time I look up, Forest have signed 3 more players.
Yeah, well, they signed 3.5 on deadline day. They signed Corbano from Botafogo. They signed Dylan Backwood from Strasbourg. And they signed Alexander Zinchenko on loan from Arsenal in a very, very late deal. That
surprised me, yeah.
That was wild. But also John Victor came in, the goalkeeper, also from Botafogo. They bought 4 players from Botafogo this summer. And look, far be it for me to say I don't know what's going on behind the scenes between Textor and Marinakis, but that seems like a lot of players, if I'm honest. But either way, John is a really good goalkeeper, and I thought the West Ham should have gone for him instead of Mads Hermansen. A lot of people said that was silly, but I think that one might end up being proved right. But they've done well here. Look, do Forest have too many players? You tell me. I don't know. But what they have done is made sure that this squad is Europe-proofed. Right, they've brought in a load of players who are going to be able to rotate in different options and areas. They've brought in backup for almost every single position in the pitch. They have a lot of players in this squad now who are going to be competing for minutes. And what that means for all of them, and look, we've had this conversation about Chelsea, right? So it would be unfair to have it about Chelsea and not have it about Forest. It means that there are going to be very good players who are going to be left out of the squads here, who are going to be left off the benches here. I think they might have too many to register for Europe at this point. So there's question marks about the system, but if they've been able to sell, and they have been able to sell again over the course of this summer, they've made money. They've made over 100 million in terms of outgoings and loans. So there are some things here that they've been able to kind of flip, and obviously big part of that is Elanga going to Newcastle. But, Danilo going to Botafogo for 21 million is a big one. Again, the Marinakis texter link on that one. But they've been able to make kind of solid prices on players who weren't part of the plans. Omar Babadeli going to Strasbourg, Ramon Sosa going to Palmeiras. And these three, I think, on deadline day are really interesting for different reasons. Curbano is an intriguing one because he's an incredibly attacking left back. And we've seen that at the Club World Cup and also obviously in the Brasileirão. But you look at it from the way that they've gone. And if you're looking at a team and thinking, okay, what do you want on the bench if you're chasing a game, if you're trying to push forward, if you're in a game against a team who you're expecting to dominate, what do you want? Someone who's going to be able to get forward from those areas and make a difference. And especially with the way that Nuno switches shapes and systems, I think this is a really smart move in terms of bringing in someone who's a different profile of player to Nico Williams, who's kind of nailed himself down as the first choice left back. Harry Toffolo went off, I think, to Charlotte in MLS in order to just get minutes. And they bring in a younger model who is basically able to get forward and make things happen. He's a flyer, and I think he could play on the left wing as well. Now, does that translate in the same way to the Premier League? Well, Forest have had success doing it before. And I think that this seems like a pretty interesting gamble from their perspective. Dylan Backwell was the one that they were sort of chasing for a long time. This is a big fee at £35 million. But it does feel like they finally got their man. And he is a precocious talent. A really, really fun player to watch. He absolutely loves going at players. He absolutely loves driving at defenders. Very few players drew more fouls, had more shot-creating actions, delivered more crosses than Backwell in Liga last season. And I think that he's a really exciting one to have in the mix here. Now, he's going to have to compete with Dan Ndoye and Callum Hudson-Odoi, who are obviously the first-choice starting wingers at the moment. There's competition there from Amari Hutchinson, from Jota Silva, maybe Curbano, as we say, who might play further forward, and also James McAtee, who, while I see as a kind of number 10, I think will get minutes off the flanks as well, and Josh Silva, right? So there's a lot of competition in these places. It is, but there is European games. They are competing on four fronts, and I think they're slightly overstocked, right? That's fine, but I think the back was a really intriguing player, and if he gets the minutes and he gets into this team, he's the kind of player that's going to get people off their seats, I think, at the City Ground. And that's the excitement you want in football. So I'm excited to see how he lands. And then Zinchenko, as you say, completely out of the blue, his move to Marseille fell through. And I did have an inkling that there might be a Premier League move for him late on loan. I think he's only got 1 year in his contract left. So it's potentially kind of something that could become a permanent deal. But they are probably in need of a little bit of European pedigree, which he does bring in spades. And I think that his versatility in terms of being able to play both at fullback and in central midfield will be a nice tool for Nuno. So as it comes to the late moment in this window, if an Alexander Zinchenko becomes available to you when you're going into European competition for the first time in God knows how long, I think that having a player of that kind of caliber is a good thing for Forest. So I thought it was a good deadline day from them. Yeah,
well, the good thing to have is Edu at the helm, because it was Edu that identified that Zinchenko would be gettable because he knew exactly what his situation was over at Arsenal. Like, as a man that had already been there, as a man that knows the ins and outs of the contract situations, we've seen Zinchenko publicly talking about how embarrassed he is to be sat on a substitutes bench at the Emirates and his kids asking why he's just sat there and not playing, right? Well, let's see how he has to explain it to him when he's on the bench at the City Ground because they've got so many players. But ultimately, Forest fell short and they needed somebody else to come in late doors. And This is why you have men like Edu at the helm. He's played a big part here in getting Zinchenko over. Now, look, Edu has his own issues because he's had this fractious relationship with Espirito Santo, and there's all
Brazilians and Portuguese, man.
Yeah, and then there's this Marinakis figure in the back. Like, this is explosive, right? The rows that potentially could happen across a season between Edu, Nuno, and Marinakis are like, that's documentary stuff. Like, there's loads of football documentaries out there on different teams' seasons. I want one on Nottingham Forest season because I want to know how they manage having 45 players in the dressing room. I want to know how they manage having these egos in the boardroom. And I want to know how this turns into success, because it actually might do. Like, that's the thing about it. The one common denominator here is that they are all absolutely determined to be successful. And as a Nottingham Forest fan, you just have to believe in the process and hope that the fireworks leads to a nice, colourful display. There might be some bad moments. There might be some fireworks that go off erroneously. But ultimately, you've got three big figures there that are absolute experts in their trade, managing football clubs, managing football contracts, managing businesses. And if they can get it right with this group of players that they've brought in, they're going to continue to have success. So I'm very, very intrigued by how Nottingham Forest season pans out from here.
Yeah, Edu's out the wheel. It does feel a bit like Marseille, the Marseille of England. That's what they've got.
Mate,
and their mad triangle between De Zerbi and Longoria and Benassia feels like it's a little bit similar to this in some ways. Right, quick word for Fulham, who did actually finally do some business after not doing anything for the entirety of the window. Kevin came in for Shakhtar Donetsk for a club record fee of around £35 million. Sami Chukwueze came in on loan from AC Milan. And the wild card, the classic Fulham wild card, Jonah Kusiasare, from Bayern Munich on loan with an option to buy, although Bayern do retain a buyback, Baby Isak, as he's known, which is a wild one. I'm not going to go too deep on Fulham because you can listen to me on Fulhamish to do that if you want. But I do think that finally Marco Silva has some new people to play with and actually having some dynamism on the wings in terms of Kevin and Chukwueze is a really good thing for this team. Also, I do think with Fulham, you look at the two players that have come in here, who have come in kind of not as wild cards as Chukwueze and Kevin. Chukwueze already has Calvin Bassey and Alex Iwobi in this dressing room, he's international teammates with, and he played with Jorge Cuenca, obviously at Villarreal. And then Kevin comes into a Brazilian Portuguese-speaking core. There is a nice cultural fit for both of these, and I think that's an important thing that sometimes gets overlooked.
I hope so, mate. I hope so. I'm not impressed by Fulham and how late they every year it gets later and later, and it already began on it was always going to be the last couple of days anyway, because that's just what they do. And this is just absolutely ludicrous how late they left all of this.
It does feel like everyone else realises there's a transfer window that starts in June, and Fulham think that the transfer window is one day. That does worry me a bit.
Always. And, they did obviously try other things, but it was all still very, very late. And even, I like that we did identify things like Dewsbury Hall as potential, but didn't manage to get them done. So there was one or two at least that I know that they did explore earlier on in the window, but it doesn't matter because they didn't get them. I hope you're right, mate. Fulham just needs to add some craft. They might be left short in the middle of the park. We'll see where Fulham end up.
I think we might see Alex Iwobi as an 8 a little bit more this season.
Might have to,
Could be very. Might have to, but also could maybe unlock the best of him as well. Just a quick trip to Europe to speak about Juventus quickly, because they had a really interesting deadline there as well. Eden Jagrova arrived from France and Lois Openda from Germany, and I think that obviously they've relinked up Jagrova with Jonathan David because they were together at Lille, and that should really help them to stick and as we say, cultural fits as well as everything else. But I think that's going to be interesting in terms of the way that he fits in and how this system looks, because they're playing 2 10s behind the striker at the moment. It's Chico Conceição and Kenan Yildiz for the time being. Jagrova is good competition, I think, in those areas. They move out Nico Gonzalez to make that stick. He's gone off to Atletico Madrid, where I think he'll be a really nice fit as well. But I think that's good business. And Lois Openda comes in as a well-proven number 9 at this point. Look, I've said before, I think that he was probably the option I would have gone for ahead of Šeško if I was looking in win now mode, because I think he's a really, really good finisher. And he has had some spells at Leipzig where it's gone under the radar, but part of that is the fact that Leipzig really weren't very good last year and didn't create very much. I think in a more creative setup, he should be able to thrive here. So I think Juve have had a very good window as well, but also a very good deadline day. Shagrova and Openda is a very good end to the window for the Bianconeri, and they look set now. I think that they're going to be in a good place, maybe not for a title challenge, but definitely to compete for European spots again.
Oh, very good, mate. Very good. Yeah. You've covered all the bases, I think, across there, mate, of what you've tried to address in that Patreon deadline day 5-part essay. I'm still getting my head around it, mate.
6-part essay,
Bonanza.
6.
Oh my God, I must have missed the last one.
This morning.
Must have gone out after I've gone to bed.
Yeah.
I'm still honestly absolutely stunned at the level of detail you went in across those profiles. And honestly, like, if you want to join Patreon and read more, like, you can get the free preview or whatever. You can get the free month. Take it up, because it'll give you content to read on trains, planes, whatever you're doing over the next month. Jack has absolutely gone for it.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of content out there at the moment. There has been over the last couple of weeks as we got towards the end of this transfer window and the start of the seasons as well, and loads more to come. So as ever, the link is in the description. We'd love to have you over there. We're going to take a quick break there. When we come back, we'll just talk about a few deals that we think have been the highlights of this window. Make sure you stick with us. Welcome back to Ranks FC for the third and final part of this episode. And Dean, I just wanted to throw it to you. What are the deals that have stood out for you as the biggest and best of this window?
Honestly, I love watching Everton now. I love it. Like, the thing with the transfer window is you want optimism and excitement a lot of the time. Now, that's what you're getting from Everton now. Like, they went a bit slow at the start, but by the end of it, you're looking at the team that they're putting on the pitch, and they haven't even fielded them all together yet, because we haven't seen Tyler Dibbling start, obviously. But David Moyes told the board, I don't want Tyler Dibbling or Jack Grealish. I want Tyler Dibbling and Jack Grealish. And I remember writing that, and I was like, we ain't going to get that, is he? And he got it. And when you consider what they already have at their disposal in the attacking positions, they're so exciting. They also signed Keenan Dewsbury-Hall, who's going to be a brilliant player, I think, for them. Iliman Ndiaye, who is, for me, their best player anyway. Like, that creative four, as well as the fact that you've got James Garner, who I think started the season really well for Everton. Like, I would be really optimistic as to what can be achieved and some of the moments you're going to have across this season. Tiano Barry I haven't even mentioned. He could be a great signing. They're still giving Beto time. Now, I know Everton fans, if you're going to be skeptical, cynical, whatever, will be a bit concerned about the defensive options and be like, we should have done more here. We haven't replaced everyone fully. Like, we could still get caught out. And you might well be right. But you're going into a new stadium now, and every week you're going to go and have a go at people. You're going to try and outscore people. And it just feels like a far cry from what we were watching at the back end of not the back end of last season, because actually Everton did start to have some life, actually. Once the season was fizzling out, Everton actually managed to score a few more goals and stuff. But for long periods of last season, Everton were dull. They were lifeless. They were not dynamic enough. And Jack Grealish in particular just seems to be absolutely thriving. He had talks with David Moyes before completing this move and was just excited to be told that he'll be able to do his thing again, that he can get out wide, take people on, and fizz crosses in. What did he do? Comes into the new season straight away. Was it the Brighton game? Fizzes one straight across, and it's steered into the back of the net. It was those type of hard, fierce crosses that Jack Grealish done for England, used to do for Villa, did a little bit for Man City before he started to change his game up. We forget that Jack Grealish actually had a couple of really good seasons at Man City, one in particular. He just needs to enjoy himself again, and he's going to be doing that. Tyler Dibbling, I hope they manage him carefully, decide how to get him into this team, but what a player they've got to come and get this team going again. A strange start to the season when they lost to Leeds, because I didn't expect that to happen. But I'm going to put it down to the jump factor of Leeds being back in the Premier League. Since then, they've beaten Brighton. They won their League Cup game against Mansfield, which had to be done. They've gone to Wolves and they've won 3-2. And then they got a nice couple of games now, which are winnable against Aston Villa at home. They've got a cup game against Wolves where they can go and beat them again. And then they've got the Merseyside derby, a game where they can really test these guys up against the very best and their rivals. And I just think this is what transfers are all about for me, transfer windows. And you talk about Fulham and how, maybe we've saved our transfer window on the last day. But because we know a bit more about Dewsbury Hall and about Grealish and about Dibbling, and we've seen them in the Premier League and seen what they're capable of, there's just that extra factor opposed to signing Chukwueze and Kevin, who are very good, but we don't know how they're going to automatically get going in the Prem. When you know the potential of these guys and you've seen them in a couple of games and they're actually starting to do it, and they could fill around the gaps of somebody like Ndiaye, who could be a star player, not just for your team, but of the entire Premier League, if he can be completely unlocked, that is exciting. So you've got a new stadium, new team, and a new mindset for your manager. This is David Moyes unhinged. This is going to be sensational if it works out. And then the games when it does work out, they're going to absolutely batter people. Yeah,
I mean, I think that they're going to be heaps of fun as well. And adding Merlin Royal yesterday was an interesting one from Freiburg, because I thought that they were looking in a kind of the double pivot, right? I thought that was what they were looking for, someone to play deeper. Royal is more of an attacking midfielder. He's played a lot of different positions for Freiburg, but he's tended to play kind of in a more advanced role. And I wonder if they're going to try and unleash him and Dewsbury Hall together, because if they do that, it could be absolute chaos. So fingers crossed we get to see more chaos from Everton, and Tyler Dibbling adding as well on that right-hand side is going to be intriguing. I just wanted to bring up a couple of other deals I thought were a lot of fun. I don't know if you saw this one, but Matt O'Reilly went from Brighton to Marseille on loan yesterday. Now, I don't know if you've seen Marseille's announcements, because Marseille's announcements have been absolutely wild, right? So they've announced it on the website, as they often do. And you're kind of looking at it and going, okay, how are we reading this? What does it look like, etc.? And I found the Naif Aguerd one first, and then I saw Matt O'Reilly's. And just let me read you a couple of lines from the announcements on Marseille's website. So it goes, Marseille are delighted to announce the arrival of Moroccan international Naif Aguerd from West Ham. He was born where the sun sculpts shadows in Kenitra, northern Morocco, between the Atlantic Ocean and childhood dreams. Naif Aguerd, a tall, calm-looking lad, never shouted loudly to get noticed. He preferred to let the ball do the talking for him, and above all, the silence of those who know how to bide their time. It's like they're all written by
it's like
poets.
You wrote it.
Well, this is the other one. Matthew Sean O'Reilly was born in South London, where the scent of tea mingles with dreams of playing on the pitches of the English capital. This slender build and calm demeanor, Matt already embodied this dual culture, that of an English father and a Danish mother. Two worlds, two rhythms, one passion. It's just like they're all really wild. It was at MK Dons in League Ones that fate smiled on him. Far from the glare of the Premier League, O'Reilly refined his game, establishing himself as a conductor and making a name for himself with his vision, surgical precision, and rare intelligence. He didn't play to shine. He played to make others shine. So what is going on here? All of these things are completely and utterly wild. I would highly recommend. There's an excellent one for Benjamin Pavard as well. So go on the Marseille website and have a look at those. But I love the fit of Matt O'Reilly going to Marseille. Finally, he gets to link up with Roberto De Zerbi, who was the coach who originally wanted him at Brighton. Sure. And he just fills this Adrien Rabiot hole in the middle of the midfield. He's going to be playing with Angel Gomes and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. Gives him the license to get through. I'm surprised that Brighton let him go, considering he started and scored in the first game of the season. But I think this is a really, really nice fit. And I think that one is going to be a whole lot of fun. Just a couple of deals that I also really like. Joan Garcia to Barcelona from Espanyol, obviously crossing the Catalan divide or the Barcelona divide in that one. 21 million, though, is an absolute steal because he was, by my money, the best goalkeeper in La Liga last season. And I think we saw at the weekend in that game against Rayo Vallecano exactly what he's worth. Saved Barcelona a point with some incredible stops in that one. And he's been excellent to start his Barcelona campaign. So a lot of love for that deal. And there was just a couple of other ones that I thought were interesting. Gabri Veiga going to Porto, £12 million. Like, Gabri Veiga, when he went off to Saudi Arabia, was being talked about as a 50, 60, 70 million pound player. And he obviously, left Celta, went over to Al Ahly, he comes back, and it's 12 million pounds as opposed to sort of the 35 that was paid for him by Al Ahly. This is wild. And he's still only 23 years old. I think he's going to have a massive, massive season at Porto. And I think that this is the first step back to him being really, really noticed again on that European stage. So Gabri Veiga, another one that I really like and I think is an excellent bit of business. So that deal I thought we'd just bring up very briefly at the end of things to round things off. And with that, it is time for us to call it a day. There'll be more on the deals and steals of the transfer window over the next couple of weeks, I'm sure, as we come to terms with how things have gone. And also a big announcement in that The Truth is back on Friday. Dig and Sam are going to be doing their own transfer window dig, and that will be back on your feeds on Friday morning. Dean and I will be back on the Patreon feed later in the week doing a post box, looking back at the weekend, as well as looking forward to next weekend and the bits and bobs that have come in our later podcast this week. So make sure you're over there. All those 68 reviews of players done on deadline day on the Patreon as well. But for now, all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Mate.
I've been Jack Collins. Thank you so much for listening to Ranks FC as ever. We really do appreciate you. And as the new season's begun, why not give us a share with any of your football-loving friends? We'd love to reach some new ears as well. So we'd really, really appreciate it, Rank Squad, if you kept passing the good news on and sharing the podcast with those you love. But for now, from us, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you all very, very shortly. Take it easy. Peace.